I watch a lot of TV, including Outer Banks. Like everybody else, I think I started watching the show during the pandemic and got hooked so quickly. It's just such a compelling, fun, riveting show. And I was beyond excited when I had the opportunity to write a prequel to the first season. So I thought I would read a little bit from the book, which takes, so the book takes place in the spring break before season 1. And it alternates in perspectives from John B. and JJ. And so the chapter I'm going to read is from John B.'s perspective. And at this point in the story, JJ had the bright idea that for spring break, it shouldn't only be the kooks who have fun. So he said we should go on a fishing trip to Outer Banks at a fishing trip from the Outer Banks to the Frying Pan Shoals, which is also known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. It's a very dangerous part of the ocean. And unfortunately, a boat full of kooks seems to have a similar idea because they just showed up while John B. and JJ were spearfishing. And one of those kooks, a beautiful girl named Savannah, has jumped onto the Pogue and a storm is starting to swell. So this chapter is from John B.'s perspective as all of those things kind of come to a head. What would Dad do? As soon as I even think the question, another pops into my brain. What did Dad do? Did he get caught in a storm like this? Did he die in a storm like this? I scrub the thought from my mind even as I try to restart the engine. Nobody is better on the water than my dad. I'm just freaking out because we're stuck here. Dad would never be so stupid to get caught on the water without checking the weather radar first. And if he absolutely couldn't avoid bad weather, well, he'd be sure to find a safe place to ride out the storm. And that's exactly what we're going to do. The light tower on the southern edge of the shoals. Dad told me it's famous because it survived several significant tropical storms. If the tower could survive all that, right smack in the middle of the graveyard of the Atlantic, it can survive this storm, which means if we can get there, we can survive this storm. JJ bends over the flooded engine at the back of the boat while I stay at the controls. He uses his body to shield it from the rain. Savannah holds an enormous torch of a flashlight over him. Try again, JJ shouts over the wind, pulling at the engine. I try the controls. Nothing happens. JJ leans down again. A few minutes later, he shouts, now. This time the engine starts. JJ cheers and Savannah lifts her arms overhead like she's just run a race. I point us in the direction of the tower. I have no idea whether it will be empty. Dad told me it used to be a bed and breakfast, but it's privately owned these days. JJ makes his way across the boat to me, walking with his knees bent for balance. He puts a hand on my shoulder. What's the plan? Light tower, I say. JJ nods. He doesn't need me to explain. Most of the lessons my dad taught me, he taught JJ too. I'll keep an eye on the engine, he says. You just get us there. I've been on the water in choppy conditions before, but I've never rode through anything like this. At times, it's like we're in a canyon between monster waves, and then suddenly we're on top of the crest, and nothing I do with the controls matters. All I can do is hope that when the wave crashes, we'll still be right side up. Through the rain, I see JJ wrapping Savannah in a life vest and then handing her a rope. She ties herself to the side of the boat. Without a word, JJ ties a vest around my shoulders and a rope around my waist and then does the same thing to himself. Since the light tower isn't actually in use, the light in the lighthouse won't be lit, which means it'll be all but impossible to see it in the darkness, which means I could be sending the boat directly toward it. We could literally be smashed to bits against one of those steel legs. I could kill us all. Maybe this brilliant plan of mine wasn't so brilliant after all. So that's just a tiny piece from the adventure that JJ and John B are on.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the book. And it really, for me, it kind of solidified them as like best friends because they didn't have to
say anything.
They just knew whose strength was whose. And so I'm so glad you read that part. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. It's hard to read. You know, normally when I read a book, like the characters' voices exist in my head, but with this book, there are already actors who play those roles. So it feels strange to hear it in my voice because when I was writing it, I was hearing those actors' voices.
So that's like one of my questions. So first of all, how did you even get the opportunity to do this?
I mean, I am very lucky. I've been very lucky, like over my career, to have gotten to work on some collaborative projects because, I mean, for the most part, most of the books that I write, I'm writing by myself. It's an idea that I came up with on my own, and I'm alone in my room and brainstorming on my own. And I've been really lucky to also have been approached to do some collaborative projects based on, based on shows and things that already exist. So for example, The Haunting of Sunshine Girl was a great collaborative project that I got to work on that was based on a YouTube series. And that was, I was thrown together with the creators, and we met, and we just had a great time brainstorming ways to turn that into a book series. And so I kind of, after I had that experience, because that was back in, 2012, I think that book, the first book in the series came out. No, it was like 2015. I don't know why I said 2012. I was like, that was not that long ago. And it was such a wonderful experience that every time I met with an editor or met with my agent or anyone, I always said, I loved working on these collaborative projects. If anything comes your way, please consider me. And I was lucky enough to have one of the editors that I spoke with was working on this project and remembered that I had said I love working on those sorts of projects. So it was a little bit of, obviously luck, and also just, I think, I'm just so glad that it worked out.
So now how do you even start? Like, how do you, to do something like this with a show that exists and you're doing it the summer before?
Well, the first thing I did was kind of, I brainstormed by myself, like a few pitches, like ideas for where the story could go. But then I was lucky enough to get on a call on a Zoom like this one with the showrunners, with the creators of the show. And so it was kind of like half a brainstorming session, half a job interview. So, first it was just to kind of introduce myself and, make sure they wanted to work with me and that they trusted me with their characters, because it's an enormous amount of trust to say, here are these people we've created and we trust you to expand their world and put words in their mouths, like these characters that belong to them. So, and so then we just started brainstorming ideas, and I had been on this, I'm very interested in big wave surfing for a book that I wrote years ago called Second Star. I had done a lot of research on big wave surfing. And so most of my pitches had been around big wave surfing. Like I had this idea that John B. and JJ were going to go on the surfing expedition. And I had completely forgotten about that. And then today, I was looking up my old notes and I was like, oh my God, I had all these surfing ideas. I forgot about that. But then as we got talking, they mentioned the Frying Pan Shoals, which I wasn't familiar with at the time. And the more they told me about it, I was like, well, that's where the story, it was just such a thrilling place for the story to take place, because it's a real location. It's famous for how many ships have gone down there. Unfortunately, it's really a dangerous part of the ocean. And it already creates a thrilling, like before you've even come up with a plot, you already have this thrilling thing going on because they're in this dangerous place. And then as I was researching Frying Pan Shoals, I started learning about the light tower, which is just like, it's shaped not like a lighthouse, but like a oil rig. Mm-hmm. And so it's this weird shape. It comes out of the ocean on stilts. Like when I was writing the book, I would look at pictures of the tower from all these different angles, trying to think of like how I could describe it, because it's so interesting looking. And then on one corner of it, there is like a lighthouse that comes out of the side. And it's been decommissioned for years. It was briefly a bed and breakfast, which is just fascinating. You can look at pictures of the bed and breakfast. And the idea that people would like basically go out on this treacherous part of the ocean to stay at a bed and breakfast in this, place in the middle of the ocean, which really has survived some of the most significant storms that have been on the Atlantic coastline. It really is just such a rich environment. So once we started talking about that being the location, the idea that John B. and JJ had gotten stuck there somehow, just it all coalesced and was like, it just fell together so nicely. So then after our sort of brainstorming session / job interview, I just wrote down, like I made a million notes. I actually brought with me, like I can show you, during our call, I had made like pages and pages of notes on my notepad. Wow. And then I typed them all up, and much to my surprise, there was a story there already just from our conversation. And so it just fell together. Like they wanted it to be about John B. and JJ. And I loved the idea of giving JJ a love interest. And and giving a little bit more backstory to how much he hates kooks and why he hates kooks. So not that he needed more reasons, but we gave him some.